My sister demanded I pay $40,000 for her extravagant wedding. I refused. She then ambushed me at a casual dinner with 3 lawyers, threatening to ruin my business if I didn't sign her documents. She didn't realize she was threatening a forensic accountant's wife. I just smiled, gestured to my husband, and said, "Meet Marcus." This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The buzzing from my phone was insistent, a mosquito-like irritation at the edge of my consciousness. I was neck-deep in the Vance project, a career-defining contract for my interior design firm, and the last thing I had time for was a distraction. The blueprints for the penthouse lobby were spread across my entire drafting table, a sea of white and blue lines that represented 6 months of my life. My eyes were burning from staring at the screen, and I was running on caffeine and nervous energy. I finally snatched the phone, ready to silence it when I saw the sender, Chloe. My sister. I smiled, a brief, tired reflex. Maybe she was checking in. Maybe she'd seen my stressed-out post on social media. I thumbed open the message. It wasn't a "how are you?" It wasn't an "I love you." It was a text message that landed with the tactical precision of a wrecking ball. "Hi big sis, just locked in the venue. It's incredible. Need the $40K deposit wired by Friday. THX. Love you." I read it once, then a second time. I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold rush that left me lightheaded. $40,000, not "can you help?" Not "could you lend?" But "need the" wired. As if it were a utility bill. As if I were her personal ATM and this was just another routine withdrawal. The "love you" at the end felt like a cheap, plastic garnish on a plate of poison. My own wedding a decade ago had been in the backyard of the small house Marcus and I had just bought. We had string lights, a local catering company, and 50 of our closest friends and family. It cost us, in total, maybe $5,000, and it was the happiest day of my life. This was something else. This was a production. My hand was trembling, but not with anger, not yet. It was with a profound, hollow sense of shock. Chloe knew what I was going through with the Vance project. She knew I had sunk a significant amount of my firm's capital into the materials and labor up front. We were successful, yes, but we weren't wire $40,000 on a Tuesday successful, not without feeling it. I pressed her contact, and the phone began to ring. She picked up on the second ring, her voice sickeningly cheerful. "Elena, did you get my text? Isn't it amazing?" "Chloe," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again, firmer this time. "Chloe, what is this text?" The cheerfulness vanished, replaced by a brittle chill. "What do you mean, what is this text?" "It's the deposit. For the wedding. Greg and I found the perfect place, but they won't hold it." $40,000, Chloe. As a deposit. "Well, yeah, the whole thing is going to be about 40, she said, and I realized with dawning horror she didn't mean the deposit. She meant the entire wedding. "No, wait," she corrected herself. "The wedding is 40K. The honeymoon is another 10, but I'm only asking you for the wedding part. Greg's parents are? Well, they're not like you. They can't help." "Chloe, I can't," I said flatly. "I can't just give you $40,000. There was a long, cold silence on the other end. I could picture her perfectly, her influencer-perfect face, pouty and calculating. She was 12 years younger than me, and I had spent her entire life cleaning up her messes, funding her failed startups, and co-signing on apartments she couldn't afford. I had paid for her college tuition, twice, after she decided her first degree was creatively unfulfilling. I had done it all with a sister's love, telling myself she just needed time to find her footing. Now, I realized I hadn't been helping. I had been building this monster of entitlement. "What do you mean? Can't?" she finally hissed, the 2 words laced with a venom that took my breath away. "You mean won't? You have the money, Elena. Don't lie to me. I see your company's Instagram. You're landing huge clients. What's wrong with you? This is my dream. This is the one day that's supposed to be about me." This isn't just money, Chloe, it's an astronomical sum. It's more than the down payment on my first house. I can't, and I'm stunned you would even ask me like this. Oh, I see, she scoffed, and the sound was ugly. I see how it is. Now that you're successful, you're going to look down on your own family. You've always been jealous of me, ever since I got popular online. Mom always said you were irresponsible one, but I guess that just means selfish and cheap. I flinched as if she'd slapped me. Jealous, Chloe, I funded the laptop you're probably using to be popular. I paid for the apartment you're sitting in. How can you say that? Because it's true, you're trying to ruin my wedding, you're trying to ruin my life. She was screaming now, a full-blown tantrum. Fine, you'll regret this, Alina. You have no idea what you just did. The line went dead. I stood in the silence of my studio, the blueprints blurring in front of my eyes. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the desk. I sank into my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The demand was shocking, but the venom in her voice, that was the real wound. The betrayal was worse than the money itself. I sat there for I don't know how long, just staring at the wall. The ambitious lines of the Vance project suddenly felt frivolous, meaningless. My entire world had just tilted on its axis. The sister I thought I knew, the one I had protected and nurtured, had just threatened me. You'll regret this. It echoed in the quiet room, a promise dripping with malice. My first coherent thought was Marcus. I fumbled for my phone and dialed his number, my hands still shaking. He was in the middle of a complex audit, I knew, but he picked up on the third ring, his voice calm and professional. Marcus Thorne. Marcus, I whispered, and my voice broke. The professionalism vanished. Alina, what's wrong? Are you okay? Is it the project? It's Chloe, I said, and the words came tumbling out. The text, the demand, the $40,000, the accusations of jealousy, the final, chilling threat. I recounted the entire conversation, feeling more and more absurd as I said the words aloud. Marcus was silent for a long moment after I finished. He wasn't the kind of man who reacted with immediate, hot-headed anger. Marcus was a forensic accountant. His entire life was about finding the patterns, the logic, the cold, hard numbers hidden beneath emotional chaos. He processed, he analyzed, and then he acted. A demand, he finally said, his voice quiet and analytical. Not a request, not can we talk about this. A demand with a deadline. She said I was trying to ruin her life, Marcus. She's projecting, Alina, he said, his voice softening. She's in trouble and she's lashing out. Don't respond, don't text her, don't call her. Let her sit. We'll talk about this tonight when I get home. I love you. We'll figure this out. I hung up, feeling a fraction less like I was free-falling. He was right. Reacting now would only feed the drama. I needed to think, but focusing on work was impossible. I kept rereading the text, each word a fresh sting. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Chloe. It was Greg, her fiancé. I hesitated, then answered. Greg had always seemed fine, a little bland maybe, but he seemed to adore Chloe. He worked some vague office job and was, from what I could tell, completely mesmerized by her influencer lifestyle. Hey, Alina, he started, his voice painfully awkward. So, Chloe's really upset. I'm sure she is, Greg, I said, my voice flat. Look, we're counting on you, you know. You've always been there for her. She looks up to you so much. This barefaced lie was almost worse than Chloe's honesty. Greg, did Chloe tell you she demanded $40,000 from me? By Friday. Well, yeah, he stammered. But it's, you know, for the wedding, it's for the family, and I mean, it's just money, right, for you. It is not just money, Greg. It's a huge sum, and it was presented as a threat. She told me I would regret it if I said no. There was a fumbling sound, and I could hear Chloe's muffled voice in the background, sharp and angry. Greg came back on the line, his tone suddenly less friendly. Well, Chloe said you'd be difficult. She said you've always been jealous of her and that you'd try to sabotage this. I didn't believe her, but I guess she was right. You don't want to see her happy." He hung up. The phone dropped to my lap. So, it wasn't just Chloe. It was them. They had a script. They had painted me as the villain before they even made the call. This was a premeditated attack, a shakedown, and Greg was her willing accomplice. The sense of betrayal deepened, hardening into something else, something cold. That night, Marcus came home and found me in the living room, staring at our own wedding album. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me and put his arm around me. "She called me selfish," I whispered. "Jealous." "You are the most generous person I know," he said, his voice firm. "You've been generous to a fault, Alina, and it looks like they've finally mistaken that generosity for weakness." "She threatened me, Marcus, and Greg," he backed her up. "He said I was trying to sabotage them." "Marcus, no." Dead slowly, his expression thoughtful. He tapped his fingers on his knee, a habit he had when he was deep in thought. "This isn't about a wedding, Alina. A $40,000 deposit, that's not a deposit. That's a bailout. Something else is going on." "What do we do?" I asked. "For now, nothing. We wait for their next move. But," he looked at me, his eyes sharp, "I think it's time I did a little digging. You co-signed on her apartment, didn't you? And you gave her that loan for her business a few years ago." "Yes," I said. "A promissory note. I never enforced it, but I have the paperwork in the study." "Good," he said. "Good." He kissed my forehead. "They think they're dealing with the big sister who always caves. They're about to be very disappointed." I leaned into him, a cold resolve settling in my chest. They saw me as a bank, an obstacle, a jealous old maid. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten who my husband was and what we had built together. The next few days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Chloe, apparently realizing her tantrum had failed, switched tactics. The angry texts stopped, replaced by a wave of manipulative guilt. First came the photos, pictures of her and me from childhood, captioned "Remember when we were best friends." Then came the long, rambling emails, sent at 3 a.m., detailing how lost and stressed she was, how Greg was trying his best, but the world was against them, and how I was the only one who had the power to save her big day. It was all a performance, and for the first time in my life, I saw the strings. My generosity had always been my default setting with Chloe. When our parents passed away 5 years ago, I naturally slid into a quasi-parental role. I was 41, she was 29. I was established in my career, married to Marcus, and financially stable. She was Chloe. She was finding herself. That finding had included, in no particular order, a degree in art history she abandoned, a certification to be a yoga instructor she never used, and, finally, her grand pivot to becoming a lifestyle blogger. This last venture was the most expensive. "You have to spend money to make money, Alina," she'd argued passionately. "It's all about the aesthetic." The aesthetic, it turned out, required a new luxury apartment, a professional camera setup, a wardrobe of designer clothes, which she'd expense, and weekly content-gathering trips to expensive restaurants. I had funded the seed money for this, a loan of $15,000 that I knew, even as I wrote the check, I would never see again. I did it because I loved her, and because I was terrified that if I didn't, she would fail spectacularly. I hadn't realized she could fail just as spectacularly with my help. The last time I'd seen her in person, at a family dinner 3 months ago, the warning signs had been neon bright. She and Greg arrived an hour late, Chloe sweeping in on a cloud of expensive perfume, talking loudly on her phone about a potential collaboration with a brand I'd never heard of. She was polished to a high sheen, hair perfectly blown out, makeup flawless, a new designer bag on her arm. But her eyes, when she finally looked at me, were hard and restless. Greg trailed in her wake like a pilot fish, carrying her coat and smiling vaguely at everyone. "Alina, Marcus," she'd trilled, air-kissing us both. "Your house is so cozy," she'd said, looking around my living room. My cozy house, which I had lovingly designed and curated, was suddenly framed as small and quaint. Marcus, you must be doing incredibly well to let Alina keep running her little hobby business. I'd bristled. My hobby business just landed the Vance contract, Chloe. It's a 7-figure deal. Oh, that's nice, she'd said, already turning away to take a selfie. Greg, be a doll and get me a glass of champagne. The good stuff, if Alina has any. Throughout the dinner, she'd probed. It was subtle at first. That painting is an original, isn't it? Mom always said it might be valuable. To Marcus, so forensic accounting, that's like real accounting, right? You must see what the really rich people do with their money. And then, the most telling, it's just so hard starting out. Greg and I are looking at wedding venues and the cost is just criminal. It's like the world is designed to punish young people in love. At the time, I dismissed it as classic Chloe narcissism. Now I saw it for what it was, reconnaissance. She was probing for assets. She was gauging my success, not to celebrate it, but to measure it for extraction. Greg just sat there, nodding along, his eyes fixed on her with a kind of blind adoration. He was a man dazzled by her performance, and he was willing to be her supporting actor, no matter the cost. Now her texts were becoming more pleading. I don't know what I did to make you hate me. I'm so depressed, I can't even get out of bed. Greg is tryin'. Gee, to pick up extra shifts, it's all my fault. I showed them to Marcus. He scrolled through them, his face grim. She's building a narrative, he said, handing the phone back. She's creating a paper trail of her victimhood for when she makes her next move. Don't reply to any of it. What next move? I asked, my stomach nodding. What else can she do? People in debt are predictable, Alina, he said, turning back to his laptop. Especially people who feel entitled. When guilt and manipulation don't work, they escalate to threats. Her first one was just a tantrum. The next one will be more formal. Formal like a lawsuit. The idea was ludicrous. I doubt she can afford a real lawyer, Marcus said, but she might know someone who can look like one. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers flying across the keys. I'm in, he said, his voice low. In where? The co-op board's portal for her apartment building. As a co-signer, you're listed as a financial guardian. And, oh, Alina, you were right. What is it? They're not just planning a wedding, they're being evicted. They're 3 months behind on rent. The $40,000, it wasn't a deposit, it was a panic button. A cold, hard anger settled over me, eclipsing the hurt. She wasn't just an entitled bride. She was a con artist, and she was trying to use my love for her as a weapon. The eviction notice changed everything. The hurt I'd been nursing for days solidified into a cold, hard resolve. This was no longer a family squabble, a simple case of entitlement run amok. This was fraud. My sister and her fiancé were in a financial death spiral, and they had been planning to drag me down with them, using a fantasy wedding as their cover story. The casual probing at dinner, the sudden demand, the scripted accusations of jealousy, it was all a poorly orchestrated shakedown. My shift from passive victim to active strategist was instantaneous. The designer in me, the one who managed million-dollar projects and wrangled difficult contractors, took over. A problem had presented itself. I would analyze its components and I would solve it. She's not just a brat, Marcus, I said, pacing our study. She's a liar. They've been lying to everyone. To me, to our family, to Greg's parents. And to their creditors, Marcus added, pulling up a new screen. This is where it gets interesting. The clever trap, as it were, wasn't something I had to set. It was already there, meticulously documented. My trap was Marcus himself. While I had spent my life managing the emotional, tangible world of design, Marcus lived in the black and white world of numbers, where every transaction tells a story. And he was the best reader I'd ever known. Let's start with the basics, he said, his fingers a blur on the keyboard. Chloe's business. Chloe Lifestyle LLC, if it even exists. A few clicks. Nope. No LLC, no S-Corp, not even a DBA. She's operating as a sole proprietor, which means her business, finances, and her personal finances are one and the same. She's taking deposits for brand deals. That's what she claims, I said, remembering her loud phone call. Let's see. Marcus navigated to her social media, but not the public-facing side. He used tools I didn't understand, pulling up archives, cached pages, and data from social media analytics sites. He found a forum for small business owners, where 3 different small batch candle makers and 2 independent jewelers were complaining about a blogger named Chloe Lifestyle, who had taken payment for a multi-post promotion 6 months ago and had simply vanished, blocking their emails. "That's wire fraud," Marcus stated, his voice devoid of emotion. He downloaded the pages. A small claims-level fraud, but a pattern nonetheless. Next, he turned to Greg. "Greg," he murmured, age 35, works at a logistics firm, salary modest. He ran a credit check, something he could legally do as a potential creditor, given that Greg was a cohabitant in an apartment I was financially liable for. The screen filled with red. "Oh, Alina," he said, and this time his voice was heavy. "This isn't just bad, this is catastrophic. It's not just the apartment, it's credit cards, maxed out, all of them, personal loans, and, here it is, online gambling sites. He has outstanding markers, Alina, over $28,000 in gambling debts." I sank into the chair beside him. The wedding money, it wasn't for a venue at all, it was for him to pay his debts. "It's the classic robbing Peter to pay Paul scenario," Marcus said. "They're drowning, and they saw you as their last, biggest lifeboat." The $15,000 promissory note I had filed away in my study suddenly felt like a critical piece of leverage. It wasn't just a forgotten loan, it was a legal document. It established me as a formal creditor, giving Marcus's investigation a legal and ethical standing that Chloe couldn't dispute. "So, what's their next move?" I asked, my voice hard. "They're desperate, they're being evicted, they've been exposed to us, they must know we know." "Not yet," Marcus said. "They just know you said no. They don't know why you said no or what we know. They still think your no is emotional. They don't know it's logical." He printed out the documents, the eviction notice, the forum complaints, Greg's credit summary. He stapled them into a neat, terrifying little packet. "They will escalate," he said. "They threatened you. They'll try to follow through. They'll try to find some leverage to force you to pay. They're probably trying to find some dirt on your business right now." A chill went down my spine. Should I be worried? The Vance project. "No, your books are clean. I do them myself," he said with a thin smile. "They'll find nothing, and when they find nothing, they'll get desperate. They'll bluff." The call came 2 days later. It was Chloe, her voice a sickly, artificial syrup. "Elena, big sis, I'm so glad I caught you. Look, I know W." E got off on the wrong foot. Things were said, we were all stressed, but I really want to clear the air. Greg and I would love to take you and Marcus out to dinner, our treat, just a casual dinner to talk, like a family, please. "Her treat," I said to Marcus, my hand over the receiver. He nodded, his eyes bright. "The bluff, it's the ambush." I took my hand off the phone. "A casual dinner, that sounds lovely, Chloe, we'd be happy to, where and when?" She named a restaurant, one of the most expensive in the city, a place she knew I loved. The irony was bitter. "Tomorrow at 7, she said. "We'll be there," I said and hung up. "It's a trap," I said to Marcus. "Of course it is," he replied, tapping the stapled packet of evidence on his desk. "But they've made a critical error." "What's that?" "They think they're the only ones bringing a weapon to a dinner party." The restaurant was all dark wood, hushed voices, and the soft clinking of expensive crystal. It was a place designed for quiet celebrations and high-stakes business deals, not family ambushes. A nervous tremor ran through my hands as we walked in. I was an interior designer. I excelled at creating harmony. This, however, was a planned demolition. "Elena, Marcus," Chloe's voice, artificially bright, cut through the restaurant's quiet hum. She and Greg were already at a large, private booth in the back, and they were not alone. Seated with them were 3 other people, 2 men and a woman, all in sharp, dark suits. They had briefcases on the floor beside them. My stomach plunged. They weren't just bluffing with a fake lawyer, they had brought an entourage. Chloe stood to air kiss me, her perfume overwhelming. So glad you could make it. You know Greg, of course. And this is Mr. Harrison, Ms. James, and Mr. Lee. They're business associates of Greg's. They were just so interested in meeting you. Business associates, I repeated, my voice cool. Marcus and I sat down, the atmosphere in the booth instantly becoming as cold as a freezer. Marcus, as always, was perfectly, unnervingly calm. He placed his own thick leather briefcase on the seat beside him and said nothing. A waiter appeared, but Mr. Harrison, a man with a plastic smile and predatory eyes, waved him away. We'll order later. We have a small matter of business to discuss first. Business? I asked, feigning ignorance. Chloe, you said this was a casual dinner, to clear the air. And we will, she chirped, her eyes darting nervously between me and Mr. Harrison. This is just a formality. Mr. Harrison slid a thick, bound folder across the table toward me. Ms. Petrova, he began, my associates and I represent a consortium that is deeply invested in Mr. Rylance's, he gestured to Greg, future ventures. We've come to understand that you are a significant figure in your sister's life. A benefactor, one might say. I'm her sister, I said. Quite, he smiled. Your sister and her fiancé have a very bright future. A wedding, a new life, all very expensive. They've found themselves in a temporary liquidity trap. And you, he tapped the folder, are the solution. I didn't touch it. I already told Chloe I am not paying for her wedding. Ah, but this isn't a request. Ms. James, the woman, spoke for the first time. Her voice was sharp. This is a familial support and non-disclosure agreement. It outlines a simple, one-time gift of $40,000 from you to your sister, a forgiveness of all prior debts. My blood ran cold, and a small monthly stipend for familial support moving forward. I stared at her, speechless. A stipend? They were trying to put me on the hook permanently. And the non-disclosure part? Marcus asked, his first words of the evening. The non-disclosure, Mr. Harrison said, his smile widening, is for your protection, Ms. Petrova. You see, my associates are specialists in, let's call it creative accounting. We took a cursory look at your business, Elena Designs. All those client trips to Milan, the material purchases from antique dealers, the number of consultants on your payroll. It all looks very aggressive, highly auditable. It would be a shame if an anonymous and very detailed tip were to find its way to the IRS. There it was, the threat. I looked at Chloe. Her face was a mask of brittle righteousness. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Sign it, Elena, she whispered, her voice trembling with a pathetic mix of fear and greed. Just sign it and this all goes away. Don't make this difficult. Sign it or I'll ruin you. My shock evaporated, replaced by a sudden, glacial calm. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it was almost impressive. They had brought 3 fake lawyers to a public restaurant to blackmail me. I laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, just a short, sharp bark of disbelief. The lawyers faltered. Chloe's head snapped up. Ruin me, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. With what, Chloe? A basal. SS tax complaint. You think I'm afraid of an audit. That's your big, powerful move. I turned to the lawyers. You all seem very interested in finances. It's a passion of yours, clearly. So, I figured, since you were all so keen to meet me, I paused and placed my hand on my husband's arm. I said, meet my husband. Chloe rolled her eyes. Marcus, what is he going to do? He's just an accountant. He's boring. He just crunches numbers. Marcus finally leaned forward. The entire booth seemed to shrink around his sudden intensity. Forensic accountant, actually, he corrected her, his voice slicing through the silence. He smiled, a thin, cold expression that held no humor. And I am very good at crunching numbers. He reached down, lifted his briefcase onto the table, and snapped open the locks. The sound was as loud as a gunshot in the quiet restaurant. Marcus didn't pull out a single, threatening document. He pulled out 5 identical, stapled packets. He slid one across the table to Mr. Harrison, one to Ms. James, one to Mr. Lee, and one to Greg. He kept the last one for himself. As my wife said, Marcus began, his voice conversational, as if discussing the weather, I'm a forensic accountant. It's my job to find stories in spreadsheets. And oh, what a story you all tell. Mr. Harrison's plastic smile wavered. He opened the packet. His associates did the same. Their professional, intimidating masks didn't just crack, they shattered. Page 1, Marcus continued, is a summary of Mr. Rylance's outstanding markers from 3 different offshore online casinos. You'll see the total at the bottom, $28,450. A nasty habit, gambling, especially when one uses, let's see, funds from one's fiancé's business. Greg went the color of spoiled milk. He tried to grab the packet, but his hands were shaking so badly he just knocked over his water glass. Page 2, Marcus said, not missing a beat, is the eviction notice for the apartment you both share, which, I must remind you, my wife co-signed for. You are 3 months in arrears. That's $10,500. You're scheduled for removal in 48 hours. A terrible time to be planning a wedding. Chloe let out a small, strangled sound, like a stepped-on animal. Page 3, Marcus's voice hardened, is a collection of sworn statements from 5 small business owners. They all paid Chloe Lifestyle for promotional services that were never rendered. The total amount is $8,200. Now, that's just a small claims matter individually, but as a pattern, it's called wire fraud, a federal offense. Mr. Harrison snapped his folder shut. He stood up so quickly his chair nearly toppled. We were retained under false pretenses, he stammered, his face pale and sweaty. You were retained, Marcus said, his voice dropping to an icy whisper, to aid in an act of blackmail and extortion. As officers of the court, I'm sure you know the penalties for that. Or, are you officers of the court? Because Mr. Lee here, according to the state bar, was disbarred in 2019. And Ms. James, well, she doesn't seem to be a member of any bar at all. Ms. James and the disbarred Mr. Lee were already on their feet, grabbing their briefcases. This meeting is over, Harrison said, his voice trembling. They didn't walk. They fled, practically running through the restaurant, leaving Chloe and Greg alone at the table, staring at the evidence of their ruin. You, Chloe whispered, her eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. You can't. You'd ruin me, your own sister. Ruin you, I said, the words tasting like ash. We're the only ones who haven't. You did this, Chloe, you and Greg, the lies, the threats. It's over, all of it. We stood up. I looked at my sister, a stranger with a face I knew better than my own. Your eviction is in 2 days. I suggest you start packing. We walked out of the restaurant, leaving them with the bill. The expected relief didn't come. I just felt empty. The next day, the true desperation began. The calls started at 6 a.m. It was Chloe. She wasn't pleading. She was rabid. How dare you? She shrieked into my voicemail. You humiliated me. You humiliated Greg. He's a mess. You think this is funny? You think you're so smart with your forensic husband? You ruined everything. You've always been jealous. This proves it. You did this. The calls came every 15 minutes. Voicemails filled with tears, then threats, then sobbing pleas for money, then more threats. She was spiraling, still defending the fantasy, still clinging to Greg as her co-victim. She still couldn't see him as the problem. I sat with Marcus at our kitchen table, listening to one of the voicemails. She's still protecting him, I said, numb. She still thinks I'm the enemy. He has his hooks in deep, Marcus said grimly. She's not just in love with him, she's in love with the lie they built. We cut off the money, but we haven't broken the spell. Then we have to, I said. This can't go on. She's going to end up on the street with him. Marcus had been holding one last piece of information back, something he'd found that was so dark he hadn't wanted to use it. There is one more thing, Alina. It's not about debt. It's about Mom and Dad's house. I looked at him, my blood turning to ice. The house was in a trust, left to both of us, but with me as the executor. He didn't just try to get money from you, Marcus said, pulling up a file on his laptop. 2 months ago, Someone tried to take out a home equity line of credit against the house, using a forged power of attorney with your signature. What? I choked. The bank stopped it. The signatures didn't match their records, but the application was filed by G. Rylance. He tried to steal our parents' house, Alina. He was going to leverage your inheritance to pay his gambling debts. This was it, the final, irrefutable proof. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Chloe. I waited for her to call me. She did not 10 minutes later. The second I answered, the screaming started. Alina, you have to help us. The landlord is here. He's changing the locks. Please just give us something. I'll pay you back, I swear. Chloe, stop, I said, my voice cutting through her panic. Stop talking and listen. I forwarded her the email from Marcus containing the scanned, rejected loan application. I heard her sharp intake of breath. That's Greg's signature on the application, Chloe, I said, my voice dead. He tried to forge my name. He tried to steal our parents' house. This is who you're marrying. This is who you're protecting. He wasn't trying to build a life with you. He was trying to steal mine. He was going to make us homeless. The line went dead silent. The only sound was a high-pitched, keening wail that slowly built in her throat. It wasn't a tantrum. It was the sound of a heart breaking. The spell was broken. For a full day, there was only silence. No calls, no texts. The eviction had happened. They were, I assumed, on the street or in a cheap motel. Part of me, the big sister part, was screaming to go find her to fix it, but Marcus held my hand. Wait, he'd said. She has to be the one to make the next move, and she has to do it without him. The call came on the second night. It was from a blocked number. When I answered, all I heard was crying. Alina, she finally choked out. Alina, I don't know what to do. Where are you, Chloe? I asked. At a bus station. I left him. I'm coming to get you, I said, grabbing my keys. She was huddled on a bench, her influencer wardrobe reduced to a pair of old sweatpants and a hoodie. Her designer bag was gone, replaced by a tattered backpack. The perfect, polished blogger was gone. This was just Chloe, my little sister. She looked 12 years old and absolutely terrified. She flinched when she saw me, as if expecting me to yell. I didn't. I just opened the passenger door. She got in. We drove in silence for 10 minutes. He admitted it, she whispered, her voice raw from crying. When I showed him the bank application, he didn't even deny it. He laughed. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. He said it was a smart play, she continued, tears streaming down her face. He said you were the dragon hoarding all the gold, and he was just trying to get what was ours. He said I was stupid for not thinking of it first. He called me your lapdog. And what did you say, Chloe? I asked, my voice soft. I told him he was wrong. I told him I was wrong. I told him he was a thief, and he grabbed my arm, he said. He said I wasn't going anywhere, that I was just as much in on it as he was. I pulled the car over, my heart hammering. Did he hurt you? No, she whispered. I grabbed my backpack and I just ran, and I didn't look back. Alina, what did I do? What did I do? This was the moment. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't making demands. She was asking for help. You're going to fix it, Chloe, I said, pulling back onto the road. Not me, you. We didn't go to my house. I drove to a small, clean, extended-stay motel and paid for a week in advance. Then, I took her to a 24-hour diner. I bought her a coffee and a plate of pancakes. Here's what happens now, I said, sliding a folder across the table. It wasn't full of evidence, it was a list of names. This is a lawyer, a friend of Marcus's. She specializes in debt consolidation and victims advocacy. This is a therapist. You will call them both tomorrow. You will get a job, a real one. I don't care if it's folding towels. She nodded, her eyes wide. And Greg, she whispered. We are going to deal with Greg, I said. The showdown wasn't a public spectacle. It was something far more satisfying. The next day, after Chloe had spoken to the lawyer, we went to the apartment. Greg was there, frantically trying to sell Chloe's designer things on the sidewalk. He saw us and his face contorted with rage. "Chloe, baby, you came back," he said, trying to hug her. Chloe, to her credit, stood her ground. "No, Greg, I came to get my things, and to give you this." She handed him a piece of paper. It was a formal cease and desist letter, drafted by the lawyer, and a restraining order. "What, W? Had is this?" he stammered. "You can't, after everything I did for you." "What you did," I said, stepping forward, "was commit fraud, and attempted grand larceny, and extortion." "You can't prove any of that," he sneered. "I don't have to," I said, gesturing to a car parked across the street. A man got out. "But they might be interested. Those are the brand partners you and Chloe took deposits from. They've collectively filed a police report. And my husband, the boring accountant, has already sent his entire file on your gambling debts to the IRS. He's also sent the file on those 3 lawyers to the state bar. You are done." Greg looked from me to the angry business owners walking toward him, to the restraining order in his hand. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a pathetic, rat-like panic. He grabbed his duffel bag, shoved past us, and ran down the street. Chloe watched him go. She didn't cry. She just watched. Then she turned, walked into the trash department, and started to pack what was left of her real life in a cardboard box. The downfall of Greg Rylance was not a dramatic explosion. It was a quiet, systematic dismantling. The restraining order held. The small claims court found against him, and the brand partners got their money back, not from him, but from a victim's compensation fund. His wages, from whatever menial job he could find, were garnished. The casino's collection agencies found him. And the IRS, prompted by Marcus's detailed file, began an audit that would likely haunt him for a decade. He was, as I had promised, done. He vanished from our lives completely. The 3 lawyers faced their own justice. Mr. Harrison was suspended by the bar for 6 months for unethical practices and attempted client coercion. Ms. James, the one who wasn't a lawyer, faced charges for the unauthorized practice of law. Mr. Lee, the disbarred one, was fined heavily. Marcus's professional network was quiet, but it was thorough. But the real story, the harder story, was Chloe. She didn't move in with me. I didn't offer, and she didn't ask. The motel room turned into a small, bleak studio apartment in a bad part of town. The lawyer Marcus found for her was a godsend, helping her file for bankruptcy and consolidating the mountains of debt that were solely in her name. And Chloe got a job. She started as a data entry clerk at a medical supply company. The hours were long, the work was mind-numbing, and the pay was minimum wage. She, who had once sneered at my hobby business, was now in a cubicle under fluorescent lights. It was humbling, and it was necessary. I didn't offer her money. I had learned my lesson. Instead, I offered her time. I visited her new apartment 3 months after the showdown. It was tiny, with second-hand furniture and the lingering smell of cheap noodles. She was making instant ramen on a hot plate. "It's not much," she said, her voice quiet. She looked normal. Her hair was in a simple ponytail, her nails were unpainted, and she was wearing a faded t-shirt. She looked tired, but for the first time in years, she looked real. "It's a start," I said, sitting at her small, wobbly card table. "It's hard," she admitted, not meeting my eyes. I logged into my old Instagram account last week. I looked at it, all those pictures, the aesthetic. I just felt sick. None of it was real, Alina. I wasn't real. "But this is," I said, gesturing to the tiny apartment. "This is real." She finally looked at me and her eyes were clear. "I'm sorry. I am so sorry, Alina, for everything. I was a monster." "Yes, you were," I said, not softening the blow. "But you're not now, and I'm proud of you, Chloe." We started having dinner, once a week. Sometimes at her place, sometimes at mine. We talked about her work. She was good at it. She was meticulous fast. 6 months later, she got a promotion to an administrative assistant. She was earning her life, and for the first time, she respected it. A year after the disastrous restaurant ambush, Chloe came to our house for dinner. She brought a store-bought apple pie. She and Marcus talked, really talked, about her new budget, about the small savings account she had just opened. Later, as I walked her to her car, an old, reliable sedan she'd bought herself, she hugged me. "Thank you, Alina," she said. "For what? For not giving you $40,000? I asked, a small smile playing on my lips. "No," she said, pulling back. "Thank you for saying no. You saved my life." As she drove away, I went back inside and stood by the window, watching her tail lights disappear. Marcus came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. The Vance project had been a wild success. My firm was thriving. But this felt like the real victory. The vindication wasn't in crushing Greg. It wasn't even in being right. It was in getting my sister back. I finally felt a sense of peace, deep and true, settling over me.